everyone, it's Kelly from Kelly's Bead Boutique. So I'm pretty sure by now you know that I not only have a love of barrel knots, but I also absolutely adore Tierra Cast. I love their product. They're great quality, it's made in the US, and they're so versatile. And they recently came out with their fabulous new renewal line, and I just love it. And one of the pieces in there was their Monstera button. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, there are going to be some fabulous designs that come out of that beautiful button. So Tracy, that works with Tierra Cast, she created her Monstera button bracelet. And it's absolutely adorable. And you've probably seen it because it's been out there everywhere. But, you know, I decided that I was going to take it and just add some barrel knots to make it look a little bit different. So that's all I've done today, but I think you're going to like how it looks. So thanks, Tracy, for letting me rip off your design. It's a fabulous piece. I'm just making it into my own. So if you want to see what I'm making today, come and join me. So the parts I'm going to be using today are two pieces of 2mm leather that is about 12 inches long, and then I have one that's about 20 inches long. You guys know that I always use too much leather. I just find it really hard to make barrel knots and get everything the way that I want when I'm skimping on leather. So if you're going to be making this at home and not purchasing a kit, you can just kind of, come up with your own measurements. But for me, I find it easier to work with a little more than a little less. I'm also going to be using 3 of these gorgeous Monstera buttons from Tierra Cast, and we're going to be using one of each color so that we have that sort of tricolor effect, which is super popular right now. For our cord ends, we're going to be using these crimpable cord ends, but today we're going to be gluing them in with some Loctite. I also have some small jump rings, a matching toggle, and of course we're going to have some barrel knots, so we need our barrel knot tube, and I'll make sure to put a link to that. It's probably my most asked question is where do you get them? So I will have a link to that in my store. So for tools, I'm going to be using my cutters, my chain nose pliers, and my bent chain nose pliers. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is match up the ends of my leather. And I want to have my longest piece, my one that's more like about 20 inches or so on top. And that's the one that we're going to be doing our wrapping with. So I'm going to go up a good 3 or 4 inches or so. I like to make sure that I've got lots of room and I don't have to worry about any sizing. So that's why I go up so far. But once you see how to make this, you can always adjust your lengths a little bit. All right, so I've got my long one on top. So I am going to place my barrel knot tube up there and I am going to do 3 wraps. So I'm going to take the one on the top here and I'm going to bring it underneath and I'm going to wrap towards my left hand 3 times. And I'm keeping those knots really nice and neat. And then I am going to take that end and put it through the back end of that tube. And then you can see it came out that way. Pull that out. And then I'm going to pull it tight. So now what I do when I have it like that is I sort of take my thumbnail and I'm not pushing into the leather with my nail. I'm just using it as a guide. And then I can push my knot up towards my nail and then it doesn't move down. So I just keep sort of turning it and getting it where I want it. Okay, so that's where we are so far. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is taking one of these buttons and putting it on each piece of leather. So I'm going to take one of the buttons, and if you've got your end of your leather kind of blunt cut, you can just kind of pull it forward. Just kind of, make it round, that'll help. And I don't really worry so much about which way these go on there. I'm just going to put one on. And then I'm going to take another one and I am going to purposefully turn this the opposite direction. So I'm going to pick a different piece of leather. So this is my top one. So I've got one going that way. And then I'm going to take the bottom one and I'm going to have that going opposite to the last one that I just put on. So again, if your leather is kind of not going through, you can just either cut it on a bit of an angle or just sort of make it round again. But the 2 fits in here pretty nicely. There we go, get that on there. Okay, and we'll pull that down. So now you can see I have like a little grouping of my buttons. And so what you can do is sort of position them the way that you want. If you want, you can have that silver one up there and then push that down. You just kind of have to get them so that they're nicely grouped together. And that's exactly the look that we're going for. So once you have these nicely tightened in there so that they're not going anywhere, we're going to make another barrel knot. So I want to make sure that my longest one is on the top. So I'm just going to flip this over just because I want to use the longer one so that I don't run out of any leather. So now you can see how these are on the bottom. So I just want to make sure that's nice and snug. And then I'm going to do another 3 wrap. So now we've got a lot of things in our hand, but we can do this. So we're going to go around once, twice, 3 times. And then I'm going to take the tail end of that and go through the back side of the tube. And then once it comes through the end of the tube, I'm going to pull it out. And then I'm going to make that tight. And I just kind of have to get that over all of the buttons. So there we go. Just kind of tighten that up a little bit. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep these in one position. So if there's too much slack in here, then these will fall all over the place. And they kind of do when they're like that, but when they are on your wrist, they lay nice and snug. So you just kind of have to find that sweet spot. And sometimes I find if I tuck one underneath, like that helps a whole lot. So it's just about positioning them, but we just want to make sure that our knots are nice and snug to start off with. All right, so now we need to measure. So if I want a 7-inch bracelet, I'm going to cut this approximately 6 inches because all our endings here and everything are going to add about an extra inch. So I find the best way to do this is to sort of find the midsection, which is kind of right about here. And I'm going to cut this approximately 6 inches. So I want to place that on the 3, just right in the middle of the 3 there. And then I'm going to come down here to where the, I'm going to mark it just with my fingers. And then I'll give that a little trim. And you can always cut it a little bit on the longer side if you're worried, and then go back and trim that again. So we're going to put that back on the 3, just find that sort of midsection point there, and then come up here to the 6. And then I'm going to give that a little cut. It's not very scientific, but it works. So now we're going to put that back on here, and we should have about 6 inches in length. Okay, so now we're going to finish off the bracelet. So we're going to just do a little bit of a dry fit. I just want to make sure that all 3 of these will go in here nicely. And those fit in there perfectly. If you can't get them in there, you can always do a little trim on one side. But I do like to make sure that they fit before I start getting my glue in there. So, and I do want to make sure that nothing's crossed over. I don't want to have any of that. So you want to have them nice and flat. So just take a minute. Got a little something on the end there. Okay, so we're just going to dry fit them, make sure that all goes in there, and that fits on there perfectly. So I'm going to use a little bit of Loctite glue to put that end cap on. You can crimp them, but you end up with this kind of a look. It will flatten out all the texture in there. So I don't mind that look, and I think it looks fabulous, but I want to show you how you can actually add glue to it. So what we're going to do is just take a little Loctite or the super new glue. You can use pretty much any kind of glue, and we're just going to drop that down inside. And if I had like a little toothpick or something, it would probably work a lot easier. What I'm going to use is I'm going to take a little bit of my cut off leather and just sort of push that down inside. And you don't need a lot, but we do need enough to make it stick, obviously. So I'm just going to put a little more there. And I like this Loctite because it's like a gel and it works really, really well. So just kind of push that down. And now I'm going to take my ends, and before I put them in, I'm going to make sure there's nothing crossing over. And then I'm going to just pop that inside there. And you know, things don't always work perfectly, but that's great there. That worked out really well. Okay, so it's got a little bit of excess glue. So always keep a little bit of something around just to wipe that glue off. But it does dry clear, so you won't even notice that. So I'm going to repeat on the other end. So take a little bit of the Loctite, drop it down inside, and don't use too much, but use enough. I know that's kind of not a very technical way of explaining it, but if you use too much, it's going to squish out all over. So, okay, so before we put those ends on, just make sure that everything's nice and flat, and then just put them inside and just give it a couple minutes and wait for that to dry. Okay, now that this is dry, we're going to add our jump rings and our toggle. So if you watch my videos, you know that I always put 3 on one side and 3 on the other. And that's to make it a whole lot easier when you're trying to do it up. I was putting on a bracelet earlier that I got somewhere else, and it only had a 1 jump ring on the one end, and it made it almost impossible to do it up. So on the one end with the round part of your toggle, you're just going to put 1 jump ring, and that will just secure that on there perfectly. And we're just going to close up that jump ring. And if it doesn't close up all the way, just go on top of it and give it a little smush until it locks right in there. And now on the other end, we're going to put on 3. And again, that just makes it easier to do up. So we're going to put 1 on and do that up. And my glue's just a little bit tacky still, so if you see me sticking, that's what it is. And then we're going to put another 1 on. And you see, even with me, I've done this a million times, and I thought, oh, I'll just do a quick one. And sometimes if you do it like this, it just doesn't hold on to this enough, and it started to bend in my hand there. I could feel it kind of twisting. So by putting the flat side of the bent chain nose plier on there, you can easily give that a little twist, and it doesn't bend the actual metal, which is really nice. Seems to work okay when you do it back up, but when you're opening it, sometimes it just doesn't want to work. So the right tools do help. And then this one is our final one. So I'm going to pop that on. And then we just want to make sure that I know which way that's going so that I put the toggle on the right way, because this one has a little bit of a texture on there and I want that to be on the top. And do that up. And again, if it doesn't work, you just kind of go on top and squish it together. All right, so I'll show you the completed bracelets. So there you go, there's our completed bracelets. I'm loving how these turned out. I love that little cluster of Monstera buttons. I think it's a really adorable looking bracelet. So we're going to give you a couple different options. You'll be able to choose your leather, and we'll have a few different colors. This is our antique green, and then of course I was working with the black there. And we'll also give you options for the end. You'll either be able to pick the gold, the antique copper, or the rhodium plate. So you'll be able to customize it just a little bit. So as always, these will be available in kit form. You'll just go down to the link below the video and it'll take you directly to my fully secure website, and you'll get to choose your kit there. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give me a like, leave me a comment. I love to hear from everybody. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please make sure that you do so. I want to thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.